the Harvard Graduate School of Education, working at the nexus of practice, policy, and research.
Welcome, everyone. It is a pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. As a Microsoft executive, John Wood was very aware of all the opportunities that globalization can offer business. And at the height of his career with Microsoft, John asked not what the world could do for him or for the firm he served, but what he could do for the world. His answer to that question began a most remarkable journey. Tonight, John will share with us his reflections about that journey that led him to create Room to Read, one of the most effective social enterprises of our time. Their mission is as simple as it is powerful and beautiful: support early literacy instruction by expanding libraries in schools in the developing world. Since 2000, Room to Read has impacted the lives of more than 4 million children by providing increased access to high-quality educational opportunities through its network of libraries and schools, local language children's books, and its girls' education program. Room to Read is changing the lives of children in Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Laos, Nepal, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Vietnam, and Zambia, and aims to reach 10 million children by 2015. But it is not just the moral clarity of their mission, the soundness of their program theory, the sheer number of children they serve, or their remarkable growth that distinguishes Room to Read. It is also the culture of the organization and John's leadership that are a central part of the story of this social enterprise. Room to Read attracts very talented people, including some of our graduates, who combine passion, skills, hard work, imagination, and creativity. It is an organization committed to innovation and to learning. The meetings of the board are a true delight, driven individuals, mostly from the corporate world, committed to the mission of the organization, and for whom no subject is off the table. Even the physical layout of their offices, open space with bright yellow and green and blue walls, invites out-of-the-box thinking, communication, and creativity. 4 years ago, John published an award-winning memoir, Leaving Microsoft to Change the World, and you can pick up your own copy signed on the way out of the room. And this book describes how he raised over $80 million of financial commitments from a standing start to develop one of the fastest growing nonprofits in history. The book has been translated into 20 languages. It is popular with entrepreneurs, philanthropists, educators, and internationalists, and I use it in one of my courses here. The book was also featured during John's appearance in the Oprah Winfrey Show, and the resulting book drive raised over $1 million from viewers. John has been a 3-time speaker at the Clinton Global Initiative and a 5-time winner of the Fast Company magazine and Monitor Group Social Capitalist Award. He has been honored by Time magazine's Asian Heroes Award, recognizing 20 people under 40 who have done something brave, bold, or remarkable. He has also been selected as a Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum and is a Henry Crown Fellow at the Aspen Institute. PBS has profiled him as one of America's great leaders, and he was selected by Barron's as one of 2009's 25 best philanthropists, ranking 11 on the list. John holds a master's degree in business administration from the Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern University, a Bachelor of Science degree in finance from the University of Colorado, and an honorary doctorate in humane letters from the University of San Francisco. His latest book is a book for children. It's the story of Zach the Yak, and it really is the story of Room to Read, and one of our recent graduates is working with him, turning these into an instrument of civic education and global education in American schools. I give you John Wood.
Thank you. You're brilliant. Good evening. You know, Room to Read's gotten a lot of honors, but I think for us the biggest honor of the last year was when Dr. Reimers agreed to join our board of directors. Fernando is such, yeah, give him a hand. He's such an incredibly valuable asset to Harvard and to the international education community in general. So we're really excited. We either Harvard didn't pay the light bills, or we're going to focus exclusively on the beautiful kids that are in my presentation. So my goal is to have more dialogue than monologue. My goal is to speak for about 25 or 30 minutes and then open it up and have discussion. So that my focus of the presentation is on this, what's called Andrew Carnegie version 2.0, doing for the children of the developing world what Andrew Carnegie did for North America by giving every single person not just the right to, but the access to a high-quality, literate environment where people can go to learn to read and to read to learn. The book that Fernando mentioned, I just want to say one thing about this title, Leaving Microsoft to Change the World. I got this title before Bill Gates could get this title. And it's not often in life that you're out in front of Bill, but we're hoping that one day he will write version 2.0 of the book after paying me a heavy fee for intellectual property. And I think that's important because Microsoft always does version 2.0. It's better than they do version 1.0. So hopefully we'll convince Bill to do that. I'm up here a little bit accidentally. I never expected to be doing this work. I was a capitalist. I was a Microsoft executive. I went off to Nepal in 1998 on a trek in the Annapurna range. There's a rumor that if you went high enough in the Himalayas, you could escape the sound of Steve Ballmer screaming at you to work harder and to crush the competition. And so I went off to Nepal as a goal to basically get out and just see the world and get away from work for 3 weeks. While in Nepal trekking, I had the good fortune of meeting a headmaster who invited me to come see his small school that he had in the little village of Bahundanda, Nepal. Many of us have seen scenes like this one where it's hopeful because kids are gathering and parents believe in education and the government is paying for teachers, but where the conditions are absolutely ramshackle and dilapidated. In this case, the school didn't look too good in the front, looked even worse in the back, but looked even worse when you got inside to see the conditions the kids were being asked to learn in. I mean, thank God this teacher was thin. There was barely enough room in the front with 75 kids crammed in. The headmaster, while showing me the school, was obviously very proud of it, but obviously knew he was short of resources. And he then said to me, let's go see the school's library. And I got excited. How many of you were library nerds as kids? Come on, you're at the Asquith Forum. You know, all you were library nerds, admit it. I'm proud to say I was a library nerd as a kid. So I basically thought the library would be the hopeful part of the tour, right? This is what a library should look like. It's full of bright colors and books and kids with smiles on their faces reading. Well, idiotic assumption. The library was a library in name only. It was a place where theoretically a library could have existed, but they had no desks, chairs. Most importantly, they had no books. And I asked the headmaster, you know, what was going on, and he pointed to a cabinet in the back of the room which had a padlock on it. And some of you may have seen these padlocked libraries. Irony noted around the developing world. Books are so scarce. Books are so precious, they are protected from the children. When he opened the cabinet, what was sadder than the quantity, only about 20 books for 450 kids, was the quality of the books. Now, I'm no literary snob. I think every child should read a Danielle Steele romance novel at some point of their pedagogical development. But these books, oh, come on, Harvard, laugh. That was funny. Loosen up, people. So, you know, these books were limited in quantity, awful in quality, and so what chance do these kids have? There's 70% plus illiteracy in Nepal. It all starts here in the rural village where kids do not grow up with books. I asked the headmaster why, and the headmaster spoke a sentence that would forever change my adult life. He said, we are too poor to afford education in Nepal, but until we have education, we will always be poor. And now, I'm no developmental economist, but I think that's one of the main reasons the world's poorest billion people stay poor. It's not that they're dumb. It's not that they're lazy. They simply lost the lottery of life. All of us won the lottery of life. We were born into families and societies that gave us educations. Maybe not perfect educations, but boy, we have it pretty lucky. We're amongst the luckiest 5% of the world. Well, this headmaster, like me, was not afraid to ask for the order. He said, perhaps, sir, you'll someday come back with books. And chapter 1 of my book, which is available for sale outside, is titled, Perhaps, Sir, You'll Someday Come Back with Books. His very, very simple request. And I got excited about this idea because I thought, I've made some money at a young age. I want to do something good with it. Once you have success, it's not enough. You have to move from success to significance. And I thought this would be something I can do to help these 450 children. And while trekking for the next 18 days, it was all I could think about. I kept thinking about Bahundanda, Bahundanda. I must come back to Bahundanda. And on day 9 of the trek, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I had this vision in the middle of the night. And I may have had this vision because I was drinking the local Rakshi at altitude. But you have to take your visions where you can get them in life. So I took the vision. And the vision was this, was Andrew Carnegie. I thought about Carnegie and what he did for America. 3,000 plus libraries opened. For millions upon millions upon millions of people, generation after generation after generation, Carnegie gave us a great gift. Many of you may know, trivia question, you can have a free copy of Zach the Yak with books on his back if you get this right. What's the busiest public library in America? Where is it? New York. Where in New York? Nope, nope, nope. It's a borough. Queens. Why Queens? Immigrants. Who said immigrants? Exactly. She gets a copy of Zach the Yak. For highest proportion of first-generation immigrants in America, in Queens. First thing you do, get their kids a library card. Super hopeful. My thought as a marketing guy was I don't want to just be Carnegie. I need to do a 21st century version of Carnegie. And so my goal was basically to be Carnegie with a yak. This is where I got my yak obsession. I decided that I'd have so many books. I didn't want to collect 50 or 100 or 1,000. I wanted to think big about this. And so the goal was to literally collect so many books I could go back to Bahundanda with a fleet of yaks or a flotilla of yaks, a full frontal yak attack on the village of Bahundanda. And this has always been the ethos of Room to Read, is to say, let's not get a mere donkey load. Let's think in yak sizes and yak proportions and scale the effort. Well, when I went back to that village a year later with my 74-year-old father in tow as my unpaid volunteer and right-hand man, we had an amazing scene. We tried to get the kids, they knew we were coming, the village had turned out, the kids had strung marigold garlands and welcomed us. There was and we wanted the kids to all queue up, and we thought the kids will each take 5 or 10 books and walk the books into the library, and they'll calmly place the books on the shelves. And our queuing theory didn't really work. It was like the kids were stage diving. It was like a mosh pit of literacy. It was like literacy palooza in Bahundanda. These kids had never seen brightly colored children's books before. And the reaction they had just overwhelmed me, because they were kids who had never seen African wildlife or gone under the ocean to see sharks and starfish, kids who didn't know that man had walked on the moon, were looking at these books and were absolutely fascinated. And it was on this day in 1999 that I wrote myself a very, very short memo to figure out exactly what I was thinking. And what I was thinking is, I've got to devote my life to this. I want to replicate this scene dozens of times, then hundreds of times, then thousands of times, all across the developing world, because this is a universally applicable service or product that can be offered to the developing world on a charitable basis that is so needed and will do so much good for kids all around the world. So I quit Microsoft in 1999 to do this full time, and at the time it was considered foolish. Social entrepreneurship was a barely known concept 10 years ago. Foundations like Draper Richards and the Skoll Foundation didn't even exist, and I had a lot of people telling me I was crazy. Right? Because in our world that we live in today, what's the first thing people ask you when you go to a dinner party? What do you do? And I was going from having a fancy title and a fancy card with Microsoft's name on it to saying, I deliver books in the back of yaks in rural Himalayan villages. How about you? And you're left standing alone at the chip dip at that point, because nobody wants to talk to you. You're considered crazy. So the question was, why? Why devote your life to this? Well, for me, it was both a head reason and a heart reason. The heart reason is pretty simple. That's because I got lucky. My dad got a scholarship to university, and he's the guy in his family who broke the cycle of poverty. He was the only one who became solidly middle class because of a scholarship to the University of Denver. And we became middle class. And then all these benefits of being middle class in America accrued to us. A public school system, a school library, a public library, Sesame Street, a public university, you name it, we had it. So I got lucky. Secondly, though, for me, were all the head reasons. As a business person and as a person who did his MBA and as a person who studied a lot of economics, I looked at it and said, what's the case for developing world education? Can you prove that this is a good investment? Well, Dambisa Moyo in her book Dead Aid points out that no society in the world has ever picked itself up out of poverty by relying on foreign aid. Foreign aid is like the drug that you stay addicted to. What does get societies out of poverty is education. I don't need to tell you this. I'm preaching to the choir here. We all know this, that when societies have education, they move up the league tables in GNP and escape poverty. And you can see all the happy countries of the world up here. You can see a lot of the kind of sad countries down here, Central African Republic, Tanzania, Zambia, Niger, Chad, Eritrea, Bangladesh, etc. And to me, what this part of the graph right here says is basically what that headmaster said to me. We're too poor to afford it. But until we have it, we're always going to be poor. And so Room to Read's goal is to work in societies where we feel like there's a good chance that in one generation they can start to move up this way and escape the cycle of poverty. So ultimately, what we view with education and literacy and the habit of reading is that it's a hand up, not a handout. and we think the world needs more hands up. Now, a second intellectual reason for this is, of course, we all know this, all the good things that happen that come with education. Education for the developing world is the one issue that has a ripple effect. It affects every other issue. So you can look using admittedly dated, I think I need to update my data here. Fernando, can you help me with this? This data is like 17 years old. But you can look at family health and look at the literacy rates and the education rates of mothers and see that educated women have lower death during childbirth, both for themselves and for their children. As we know, as Queen Rania is fond of pointing out, an educated woman is twice as likely to vaccinate her children. Nice ripple effect. Education is even related to life expectancy. You can see, and anybody who knows Abby Fallick, who's an HBS grad, Abby put these slides together for me, you can see a direct link between how much education somebody gets and how long they can expect to live. And literally, it can be a 3 or 4 decade difference. And I don't know if any of you, like me, are over the age of 38, but to me this is sobering, that we can live in a world that has so much abundance and yet have a life expectancy that is so low. So for me, when I looked at Room to Read, I said, we have to think about this in a really big way, because there's a lot of potential customers out there. And when I say customers, we are, of course, a nonprofit. But I tried to think of it like a business would think of it, to say, what do you need to do? Well, you need to scale the business. Why? Well, number one, because 200 million kids in the developing world woke up this morning and did not go to school. 200 million kids did not go to school this morning, did not have a school to go to. About 773 million people in the world today are illiterate. 1 of 5 adults cannot read. The Arab League reports on itself that half the adult women in the Arab League countries are illiterate. This is a huge, huge issue. And what we've done, and Fernando mentioned our countries, we tried to move in to sub-Saharan Africa, to South Asia, and to Southeast Asia, in places where you have the highest percentage of illiteracy. And it's shocking to me that with Asia's economic growth, there's actually more illiterate people on the Asian continent than there are on the African continent. So we work with Asian companies to say, you should make this a priority to make sure that more and more kids are getting educated. Now, when I thought about starting Room to Read in 2000, my first thought was, those are large numbers. 200 million, 773 million. And we can't just do it in a small way. We have to make a significant dent and really look at the fact that if we have a scalable solution, we can reach literally hundreds of thousands, then hopefully millions, then hopefully tens of millions of kids. But to do that, we need to take a very different crack at it. And the goal with Room to Read from the very beginning was to say, the Andrew Carnegie of the 21st century will not be an old, rich, white male. It will be a network. And we're going to build that network. And we're going to get people like you involved in that network and people all around the world involved. And to say the 21st century deserves a very, very different model, a distributed model that takes advantage of the bandwidth, the brain power, and the resources that are available all around the world. So I'll talk a bit more about that. The goal from day one that I set out for Room to Read, when I announced that Room to Read was formed, and when I announced it, it was like me in my second bedroom with a crappy cell phone and a laptop computer go, woo, we're launched. And the goal I wrote was 10 million children reached by 2020. It was a huge goal. I was told it was way too ambitious, that it was hubristic, that it was a joke, that it was a fallacy we could reach 10 million children. And I said, well, if we're going to do this, let's do it. My number one rule of social change is very simple. It is that bold goals attract bold people. I think wimpy goals attract wimpy people. If you want to surround yourself with really wimpy people, announce a really wimpy goal, and people will salute that flag. I purposely wanted to scare people. I wanted people like Dr. Reimers to be a little bit scared when I asked them to join the board, to say, really, is this really going to be possible? This guy's crazy. And I'm proud to say that we're actually on track, and I'll talk more about this, but we're actually on track not just to meet this goal, but to exceed this goal. So the first thought, though, was how do we get things done? How do we make sure that when we're building a library or funding a scholarship for a girl in Zambia or building a school in Nepal, that the product's going to be good, that the quality is going to be high, that it's sustainable, and that it has sustainability built in from the very, very beginning. So the first part of our model, which I think is one of the most overlooked things in the world today, is that you need to have strong entrepreneurial local teams. Our goal was not to send expats overseas to boss the local people around. The world has more than enough Americans overseas bossing people around. Our goal was not to take short-term volunteers and send them over for a month or two, because you wouldn't want your kids to be taught by a Ugandan volunteer on summer vacation who's available for 6 weeks and then leaves and doesn't speak your language. We need to build the local capacity. So the first goal of Room to Read is very simple. It was that in our countries of operation, we would have 100% local employees, 100% local employment. They speak the language, they know the conditions, and they're quite motivated. So strong Vietnamese in Vietnam, strong Nepalis in Nepal, strong South Africans in South Africa. It's a very different model, and sometimes people get mad at us because they say, you know, I want my kid to go over and work in Cambodia this summer, and we have to say, we We don't have that model. All of our librarians in Cambodia are actually Cambodian, and they speak Khmer, and we think that's the way that it should be. The local teams then did something that was equally important, and Dinesh, who's one of my co-founders, who's second from the left, the country director for Nepal, came up with something very early on called the Challenge Grant. And the Challenge Grant has always been a core part of the DNA of how we work. The idea behind it is very simple. It's that you can't help people if they don't want to help themselves. And in the world today, I think too much aid just gets dropped off with no pre-commitment or no co-investment on the part of the local community that we're working with. So Room to Read's Challenge Grant really looks like this. It is parents and the government and the local citizens taking charge of their own initiatives. In this village in Nepal, I watched mothers who woke up before sunrise, and they walked an hour and a half down a steep donkey path to the road where the 100-pound bags of cement are waiting. Put them on their back, get it done. Just get up there, and the mothers then have to go out and work in the fields for the day, but the mothers believe in education for their kids. The land, donated. We've never bought a piece of land, ever. We make sure that the local people have enough skin in the game that they're going to be able to find a donation of land. We have parents come out and do the work to get the library built, to build the shelves, to paint the walls, to build the school, whatever it might be. This is the groundbreaking ceremony for a Room to Read library in Laos, one of the poorest countries in the world. And what happened the day that the groundbreaking ceremony happened, we had a huge problem. We ran out of shovels. What a great problem to have an all-time high ratio of parents to shovels. And how much better would education systems be around the world if you had this metaphorical scene where parents are hyper involved in being part of the solution for their children. So the idea behind the Challenge Grant is replicated literally thousands of times a year all around the world in the 9 countries where Room to Read works. And we really firmly believe in this, that the local people are going to basically take control and make the project more sustainable because they have skin in the game. In Nepal one day we heard a group of mothers talking, and one of the mothers said, "That is the most beautiful roof in all of Nepal." And our country director said to her, "Why do you think that roof is beautiful?" And she said, "Because I helped build it." That to me is a very, very hopeful thing. Now we tried to take lessons from the business world also and apply them to Room to Read's model. And one of the things we looked at was cost control, right? Because the average charity in America spends 30 cents on the dollar directly on overhead. And that means only 70 cents on the dollar goes directly to programs. And so as a business person, I said, how can we wring every single dollar of costs possible out? Because 17% versus 30% doesn't sound like a lot, but if you scale to be a $30 million organization or a $50 million organization or a $100 million organization, you could literally lose $10 million a year just on an inefficient system or a bureaucracy that sucks off too much of the money. So we have a model at Room to Read we call cheap and cheerful. The idea would be don't spend money on stuff you don't have to spend money on. Be creative, use your sales skills, use your entrepreneurial skills. So this is a picture of our team in Cambodia setting up some of our first libraries in Siem Reap province near Angkor Wat. And I love this photo because you see the guys with the motorbikes putting the things on the back and going out there. And this is not an expensive solution. Now one thing that's missing from the photograph of our service delivery, and I'm very proud that it's missing, is this thing. We have a no Land Rover policy at Room to Read. How many of you have been in the developing world and been overwhelmed by the number of SUVs bearing the logos of aid agencies that are usually outside the watering hole at 5 p.m. on Friday, and there's a traffic jam in downtown Phnom Penh because so many people, and with their drivers, of course, are there spending the money? We have what I call the Land Rover test. It is very simple. What does it cost? $75,000. How much does it cost to put a girl in Room to Read's education program for 1 year per girl? $250. So if you buy one Land Rover, how many girls have you cheated out of an education? Math majors. 300, exactly. And that's if you buy one. And we know that Land Rovers are like potato chips. Nobody ever has just one. So we use this example in talking to our local teams and trying to inculcate in our culture the whole idea of cheap and cheerful. And I'm proud to say that last year when we launched Room to Read Bangladesh, they were inspired. And I have to say that nobody can out-cheap and out-cheerful the Bangladeshis. We are super proud of their implementation in Bangladesh of cheap and cheerful. And to keep this whole methodology alive and to make it real, we created a category of investors we call overhead angels. And the idea is we challenge everybody involved in Room to Read to find one way to help us to cut costs out of the system, unless those costs are programmatic costs. So I'll give you a couple of examples of this. Wendy is here from our New York office. Our New York office is borrowed from the Financial Times. They give us free office space in Midtown Manhattan. Our fundraising offices in London, Hong Kong, Sydney, and Tokyo are housed at Credit Suisse. Great landlord, no invoice. We love that. One of my board members once bragged to me that he had 5 million frequent flyer miles. He does not anymore. He's a Goldman guy, and he's super generous. Goldman deserves a lot more praise than it gets for having a very philanthropic culture. And we told that story at an investor conference once, and a guy at Barclays Capital stood up and he said, I've got 750,000 BA miles. I'm going to have Barclays try to match Goldman Sachs in the number of frequent flyer miles they can give room to read. We went to Salesforce.com and asked them for free use of their database. We got all you can eat, 400 users for free from Salesforce.com. And I'm proud to say that this year, this photo was taken last month in Zambia, we finally got our first 2 4-wheel drive vehicles, but they were donated. My college roommate is actually the senior vice president of HR for Lafarge, the biggest cement company in Africa. And I have these photos from our senior year that he never wants to have anybody see. So the message to Lafarge is keep those Land Rovers coming. So as a result of this model, we've managed to get every year the Charity Navigator 4-star rating, the highest rating for financial efficiency. Only 8% of charities in America get this rating, and we're one of that proud 8%. And we're super excited about that. So if any of you have ideas on how you can cut costs, let me know. I'm here for free, courtesy of Harvard. They paid for my ticket, they're paying for my hotel. Tomorrow night's hotel is donated. We're trying to do everything in our power to keep the costs low. And then in addition to keeping the costs low, the final part of the model for us was how do you get the revenues to be high? Because every year we turn away thousands of students who want to join our Girls Scholarship Program. Every year we turn away hundreds of villages that want a library, that want a literate environment, because we don't have the money. What we did starting in 2001 is launch these very entrepreneurial fundraising chapters, where we said, let's be like Robin Hood. Let's raise money everywhere in the world where people are rich and deploy it everywhere where people are resource deprived. So we went out and told people, we want you to carry a Room to Read business card and be a fundraiser for Room to Read in your geography. It's people like you, and we'll pitch all of you to get involved in our Boston chapter. It's a great chapter. We want to get more people involved. And this thing took off like wildfire. And today, from Atlanta to Austin, from Austin to Boston, from Boston to Amsterdam, from Calgary to Chicago, to Dubai to Hong Kong, to Tokyo to Osaka, to Sydney to Melbourne, to Vancouver to Seattle, to San Francisco to Santa Barbara, we have these Room to Read fundraising chapters all around the world. 6,000 people now involved who carry a Room to Read business card with $0 of payroll. And if you're interested in the Room to Read chapter, Michelle up here is one of our chapter leaders who coordinates these chapters. What we told people early on is don't worry. You do not have to ask your friends for money. You have to invite your friends to a party, and I will ask them for money. And we've perfected this model where literally now in some of our bigger events, we literally will stand on a stage and say it costs $30,000 to fund a school in Nepal. Who wants to fund a school in Nepal? And I'll tell you as a founder, it does my heart good to literally see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hands raised in the air. And you get funding for 10 schools in less than 1 minute. That's the power of the model, because these entrepreneurial chapter leaders are driven by one thing, passion. And passion, thankfully, is infectious. The final end result of all of this, with the local teams, the community empowerment, the Ministry of Education, which is a partner of ours, they sign on to provide trained teachers and trained librarians to each and every Room to Read project, along with the chapter model, means we've got a model that's built for very, very serious scale. One thing that's allowed us to do is to think creatively, because we've been able to find a way to get some of the financial resources to do the stuff that's a bit out there. And one of the things we've had to do is actually figure out how to fill this vacuum that exists. Nature abhors vacuums. Social entrepreneurs love them because they present an opportunity. One of our biggest issues, and one of the reasons that most of the people in the world today who are illiterate are in the developing world, actually 98% of the people in the world today who are illiterate live in the developing world. Why? Well, part of it just has to do with lack of local language content. Can we imagine what our own lives would be like had we not had Sesame Street or Dr. Seuss or Harry Potter? These books that have become iconic to us and to our children and grandchildren have a huge, huge impact. But throughout the developing world, there's no market. There's no viable commercial market for children's books because the parents are too poor to afford them. So Room to Read went to the Skoll Foundation in 2004 in Palo Alto, and Jeff Skoll is one of my heroes. Thank goodness they dared to take risks. They do what foundations should do. which is take a few risks rather than just backing the same stuff they back every year. And Skoll gave us enough funding to launch a Nepali language publishing initiative. Nepal didn't have children's books, nor did Cambodia, nor did Laos, nor does Sri Lanka. And we said, well, we're going to have to invent the industry then. So we went out and we found out there was a group that's called the Nepali Society for Children's Literature. And we don't know what they've been doing all those years, because they hadn't really been producing much children's literature. So our country director, Dinesh, went and talked to them, and he found out one thing. They said, oh, we have a lot of story ideas. Nobody's ever asked us to produce a children's book. So we said, great, let's do it. We had enough money for 10. We had 68 manuscript submissions within the first month of all these Nepali authors and artists who wanted to do children's books. So like every great success story in the social entrepreneurship space, it started small, 10 books, and it scaled from there. I'm proud to say now that Room to Read prints books in 21 languages across the developing world. We have now produced over 550 original titles that are local authors, local artists, and it's original content. It's not a translation of a Western work. It's a story from Nepal or Cambodia or South Africa. And so what I want to do for those of you who are book lovers is show you what that looks like. I'm not going to show you all 500 books, I promise. That would take a little bit of time. What I am going to show you is 30 books in 30 seconds. And what I want you to imagine is imagine being a child in the deserts of Rajasthan or in post-apartheid South Africa or in post-Khmer Rouge Cambodia who's never had a library. And then one day you see your parents over there and you hear some nails pounding, and you see shelves being built, and the teachers tell you this is going to be a library. And you say, what's a library? Never heard of it before. And then one day the library opens, and you as a child walk in, and this is what you see. How would you feel if all of a sudden you walked in? At least one person feels like clapping. That's great. One. So take that and multiply it. 550 original titles today, over 1,000 original titles by the end of 2012. It's part of our business plan. And for those of you who are worried, and I heard some of you going, because you're worried about the plight of the lost baby elephant, I want to assure you that all of our stories do indeed have happy endings. For us at Room to Read, our happy ending is that we're now 10 years old. And we've kind of gotten past that gangly adolescent stage. We still have screwed some stuff up, and we've done some things wrong. We still have to improve. We have to get better at what we do. But fortunately for us, we've had good success in our first 10 years, beyond what we thought we would ever have achieved. Number one, our Girls Scholarship Program. I'm proud to say that today, more than 10,000 girls are receiving long-term support from Room to Read, with the guarantee that this will renew year after year after year after year until that girl finishes secondary school. They're guaranteed that from us, that they will stay in school at the end of secondary school. We provide them with material support, school fees, uniforms, shoes, book bags, bicycles, school supplies, but most importantly, we provide them with mentoring, with after-school tutoring, with life skills coaches, so that these girls are being told you can do anything you want to do and you can achieve anything you want to achieve. And I think there's a power in this room attests. There is nothing like a society that is full of butt-kicking women. We need to have more of that in the world. That's where change really, I'm proud to say, ich bin ein Feminist. It is an important thing that every man and every woman has to care about this issue. We are working with other NGOs that partner with us, NGOs like the Nepalese Youth Opportunity Foundation that free girls from human trafficking. And then Room to Read puts them on scholarships. And we have 700 girls now in Nepal who have been freed from an oppressive system that sells them in childhood slavery. And NYOF has freed them. Room to Read has put them in a school. We have villages in Delhi, actually 3 hours west of Delhi, where this girl you see here is the first girl from her village to ever attend 9th grade. There are 8 villages that are in one cluster. And this is 60 years after independence, 3 hours west of Delhi. Not a single girl has gone to 9th grade. Our team believes in something we call GSD, get stuff done. There's also an R-rated version of the saying, but we'll stick with get stuff done. And our team went and said, let's go talk to the village and find out why. And let's ask the question respectfully, why? And the fathers, and these villages are all Muslim, the fathers told our team, there are no female teachers in any of the schools. And our daughters are now teenagers. They're past puberty. They are not allowed, under our view of Islam, to attend school if there are not female teachers. Well, our team said, GSD, okay, give us time to figure that out. Went and we partnered with the Ministry of Education. We requested female teachers come to these schools. The ministry placed trained teachers in the schools, and then one girl had to be first, who had to be the first to go to 8th grade. This was 2 years ago. She's now in 9th grade, but she is the tip of the spear, because she's the first in 9th grade, but today there are 27 girls in 8th grade, and there are 650 girls in 7th grade who have vowed they will go through secondary school. That's in 18 months on an intervention of $250 per girl per year. So one reason I'm an optimist of growing this into a movement is it does not take much money, and there's less resistance than people think. There's a lot of, I don't know what, a lot of stasis, not enough forward motion, but many times it does not come from resistance, or if there is resistance, it's actually an easy problem to solve. So we have to not just do quantity, we have to do quality. So the question is, okay, so what? So you have these girls in scholarship. Do they pass to the next grade? Yes. 98%, 96%, 98% are our numbers for the last 3 years, because we really look after the girls and encourage them with after-school tutoring. In Vietnam last year, 61% of our girls who finished secondary school matriculated to university. And we don't pay $1 of university tuition because we can't afford it. We want to put the money back in to get more girls in the pipeline. But these girls found their way to the government scholarship schemes. And we're super encouraged about this, because if you think about this for a minute, if you're born poor, rural, female, in the developing world, 2 parents who are illiterate, you have 5 strikes against you. If you're born as a girl in a lower caste or has been freed from trafficking or has been freed from prostitution, you have 6 strikes against you. But you look at these faces, you look at these kids and how they're succeeding, they don't know that they're supposed to fail. They don't think that at all. They are going to get out there and just study hard day after day after day. Our second big milestone we hit this year is we opened our 1,000th school. We actually have now opened 1,128 schools using this community model of community donations of labor, Ministry of Education providing and paying for the teachers, and Room to Read bringing in the outside investor, the outside capital, to get the school built. In the last 2 years, we have averaged a new school opening every 26 hours, somewhere in the developing world. With metronomic regularity, a new school opens every 26 hours. How do we do it? Well, people love the fact that it's a leveraged model. The Ministry of Education is providing the teachers and paying for them, so we're leveraging their budget, that the challenge grant is in place, and also investors get a dedication plaque. So if you want to dedicate something to grandma for her 80th birthday, or you want to dedicate something to your wife for your anniversary, we had a guy actually in New York this year who said, instead of buying my wife a Rolex, I'm buying her a school. And we're like, you might want to check with your wife on that. She might. We had one guy who actually, he and his fiance agreed that instead of an engagement ring, they would build a library. I thought that was very, very cool. And the question comes up, well, are these things sustainable? Are they successful? It's one thing to cut the ribbon, but as our country director in Nepal says, when you cut the red ribbon, your job's 5% of the way done. You have to go back and monitor the quality, evaluate it. We're very fortunate that the Gates Foundation funds all of our evaluations and then provides intellectual firepower to review them with us. But we find that the schools, they stay open, and the biggest problem we have is overcrowding. They're too successful. Again, good problem to have. This is a picture of our 5th school we ever opened back in 2001. My friend Hillary sponsored this in honor of her parents. And we went back in 2005 on a surprise visit. I was heading off to Trek and said, let's stop by Hillary's school in Benegat. And this is what the school looked like the day it opened. We pulled up and something was amiss, because this is what the school looked like today. Went from that to that. We said to the headmaster, what happened? And the headmaster said, we had too many students showing up. We ran out of space. We were turning students away. And I said, so Room to Read helped you to build the addition. And the headmaster said, no, you helped us last time. You did not need to help us this time. We got the land donated. The parents donated the labor. The Ministry of Education is providing the teachers. I said, yeah, but you still had to buy the cement and the supplies. How did you do that? And the headmaster said, oh, there was this trekker who was Italian, and he was lost, and he came to our village. I convinced him to give us 20,000 euros to build the schools in addition. So you have to love that a Nepali headmaster is not afraid to ask for the order. The final statistics for us, over 8 million books placed in the hands of kids. And I'm proud to say that over 5 million of that 8 million are local language mother tongue books that we have self-published. We've hit a tipping point with this program. About 3 million are in English, because everywhere that we work teaches English as a second language. And companies like Scholastic give us literally millions of books for free. We work directly with publishers, so we're super excited about that. Scholastic has been very generous, as has Pearson, Penguin, Chronicle Books, McGraw-Hill, etc. And then I mentioned earlier the final milestone is several miles away from our first library in Bahundanda. On April 26th of this year, we opened our 10,000th library. Carnegie opened 3,000 libraries in 33 years. We've opened 10,000 in 10 years. That was on a base of nothing, with no capital, no operating model, and in the beginning, no employees. So we are optimistic we can continue to scale this up and reach more communities that need to have their first library. One of our board members, Tim Kugel, the former CEO of Yahoo, says to me, what keeps him awake at night is we have a product that is universally applicable, that is needed everywhere. And so we have to grow it faster because every day we lose is a day we don't get back. And at Room to Read, we're a very performance-driven culture. We're very psyched about the fact that every single day we open 6 libraries. We open a library every 4 hours across the developing world. But we should be opening one every 3 hours, every 2 hours, every hour, because we know this is needed. And all of you, of course, I think have traveled in parts of the world where you can see the need. You can put a map of Ethiopia up on a wall and throw 100 darts at it, and you'll probably land on 99 villages that do not have a functioning library and do not have a path to literacy, which is, of course, the cornerstone of education. So we're very impatient to get more done and reach more and more and more of these children. Were I asking you for money, this is the shot I would be using right now, because this, to me, is what hope looks like when you have these young kids in school learning to read. And I want to use this opportunity, this little girl, to basically say that as much as we talk about girls a lot at Room to Read, I want to be very clear that we are not anti-boy. As a former boy myself, I would never want to be accused of, I'm sure the other former boys in the audience also would not be accused. I'm proud to say that half the children we reach are boys and half the children we reach are girls. And that's the way the world should be. It's the way the world isn't throughout much of the developing world, but thankfully for us it is. And then the final metric-driven comparison, as I am high on their product, is our Starbucks test. When I started Room to Read, I said, if this private sector can scale quickly, why can't the social sector? There's money out there, there's brain power out there, there's passion out there. And so we went actually and we benchmarked ourselves against Starbucks post-initial public offering of stock. And what you see them in their first 8 years, they're in yellow, number of new coffee shops. In green, number of Room to Read libraries. And by year 5, 6, 7, and 8, we actually were out Starbucking Starbucks. And we're really excited about this because we think the model is such that we would like to just keep growing this number to the sky, because if the world needs a good latte, the world damn well needs literacy. So we have to think bigger about this. 5 million children now have access to our schools and libraries. Every one of those schools and libraries is subject to a great system of monitoring and evaluation to look at the efficacy year after year after year by visiting them on a regular basis. And actually one of Fernando's graduates, Peter Cooper, I'm proud to say a Harvard Ed School grad, is actually on our monitoring and evaluation team and goes out and looks after things. So in closing, this is really still what Room to Read looks like. We're expanding across Africa. We're now in South Africa and Zambia. We're right now in kind of a quiet period of raising money for the seed funding for Tanzania. We're hoping that it will not be a quiet period for long. We're hoping it will eventually be a very noisy period of fundraising for Tanzania. And we're working with librarians everywhere. We've done over 15,000 training days with librarians in the last 2 years and with teachers to help them to know, how do you teach literacy? How do you get habit of reading? How do you do literacy games? How do you get a checkout system in place? And I was in Zambia this summer, and there was a librarian who told me, her name was Agnes, and she told me she had over 1,100 students accessing the library on a daily basis. And I said, what time do you open? 7 o'clock in the morning. What time do you close? 5 o'clock at night. And I said, Agnes, that's 10-hour days with over 1,000 students. Isn't that difficult? And she said, yes, John, it is difficult. When you believe in something, you must do it with all of your power and all of your passion and all of your energy. And this is what I do for the children of Zambia. And that to me is, wow, there is so much potential good news out there. This is good news from Cambodia. We loved getting this picture from our local team. This girl and her brother and sister commute to school in a leaky rowboat. And they get to school half an hour early when the library opens. It's a half-hour reading period. And she ran into the library, and half an hour later the teacher came in to tell the kids it was time to start school, and the teacher said, "You forgot to take off your life jacket." That to me is what hope looks like. After 1 decade, the question I'm always asked is this: do you miss it? Would you ever go back? And I think this photo probably answers that question. Does This was not taken the day of the Windows 95 launch or the Windows XP launch or the new Bing launch. This was actually taken at a library or a school opening in Laos. So for me, 10 years on, I'm really happy because when that headmaster said, please come to their side, go from the known world to the unknown world, I had to cross this bridge of uncertainty. And we didn't know we'd get it done because nobody knew who we were, and we had no resources, we had no full-time employees, we had no endowment, we had no fundraising experience, we had no sugar daddies or sugar mamas. We had one thing, determination to get out there, to say every day we lose is the day we don't get back. And as we see the work being done today, we believe that this is going to turn in, or it's actually in the process of turning into a global movement that says that every child deserves the right to be educated. And we're part of it, and there's other great NGOs that are part of it, and governments are part of it, but we have to agitate loudly and frequently. And I mean we collectively, all of us need to do this and turn this into a movement. Because we believe that when the history of the 21st century is written, there should be a chapter about universal literacy and universal education. We believe that the whole idea that a child can be told you were born in the wrong place at the wrong time to the wrong parents and therefore did not get educated, that notion belongs on the scrap heap of history. That every child should be told you were born in the right place at the right time and you had a school and you had books and you had a literate environment. Maybe you even had a 1980s new wave tie like these young children in Sri Lanka. And I know this because I went to college during the 80s when new wave was actually new. The final image really for me that says it all is this in Sri Lanka in a rural library where this child so believes in the importance of reading that he's inculcating his stuffed animals in the habit of reading. Fernando, this photo was inserted for you. I thought this would really touch you. So in closing, one final thought. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you. I think we have about 20 minutes for Q&A, and for those of you who do want the book but who have to leave, the books are pre-signed. If you want to buy it from the Harvard bookstore, we've pre-signed a bunch of them outside. So why don't we just go to Q&A, and what I would say is, on questions, brevity and directness are appreciated. There are microphones, or if you have a loud voice, and we'll have the first question from the back. For you. Debbie Downer, yeah.
Interesting to hear about challenges, things that didn't work out and maybe what you learned from them.
No, I'm happy to talk about those things. That's actually what makes it interesting. And if you want to know more, you can actually go to our website at roomtoread.org. We actually publish our external evaluations that reveal warts and all. We are willing to tell the world, here's what we are not doing well, and it's outside evaluators who are independent telling us, here's where you're good, here's where you're weak. Mistakes we've made. Number one, we should have invested in local language publishing a lot earlier. We relied too heavily on English language book donations, which are good, but obviously the cornerstone of literacy is mother tongue. Number two, didn't hire enough people quickly enough. I kept the overhead to 5.3% for the first 3 years. So investors were giving money, and then we weren't giving them timely reports and weren't getting back to them, weren't cultivating the relationship. So by saving money, we actually cost ourselves a lot of money. Number three, we didn't do enough in the area of literacy. And Fernando will not give himself enough credit, but Fernando's been a real guiding light for us to say, it's not just about books and it's not just about libraries. You have to get in there and influence literacy. And I remember a very cathartic meeting where Fernando said, this literacy stuff, it's not rocket science. It is hard, but we know how to do it. We have to apply it to Khmer and Hindi and Nepali, et cetera. But somebody else on our advisory board, we are in this moment of, do we embrace literacy as the next, kind of evolution of our strategy, which sounds like duh, of course you have to, but let's keep in mind, resources are limited. And we looked at our data and said, the data tells us we need to do more of this. And I remember one of our advisory board members said, John, there's a reason that your charity is not called Room with Books. I get chills when I remember that, because that for me set me over the edge and said, okay, we got to embrace this. And there's more stuff that we've screwed up that I can tell you in an unplugged session later tonight.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Werby, a master's student here at the Ed School, and I'd like to build on one of Professor Reamer's earlier introductory comments about innovation and learning within your organization. I'm taking a class this fall with Monica Higgins on entrepreneurship or leadership, entrepreneurship, and learning. So we're looking at case studies where organizations or corporations have, like you, not rested, not been content to stay with the status quo. You're pushing constantly to innovate, to grow, to scale up. How do you facilitate this learning across your organization? I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, it's a great question. So one of the things we do is it sounds really stupid, but we have a universal email system. So most NGOs, you've got employees on Yahoo Mail and Gmail. Are you leaving? No. Oh, okay. Yeah, brevity's one thing, but leaving is. So having an IT system set up so you can share information across it. Every employee has a .room to read email address, and you can literally email Zambia team, Bangladesh team, worldwide team. The number one thing my teams ask me for, more frequent communication. Like, John, we want to know where you are, what you're doing, what you're learning, what you're seeing. We use flip video cameras. Everybody who travels with a flip video camera. I had a great experience 2 months ago in Zambia. I interviewed this girl, Malenga, who's in our scholarship program, 16 years old, and she's at that beautiful cusp where a young girl turns into a young woman. And with self-confidence, she pointed to my flip video camera and she said, John, one day I'm going to come work for Room to Read. And I said, why, Malenga? And she said, so every girl in Zambia can have the opportunities that I have had. And literally, I'm behind the camera, cheap and cheerful, filming her myself, and you hear my voice saying, will you go to university? She goes, yes. I said, will you finish secondary school? She said, I will finish in the top 10% on the exams. John, I will email you one day. And you hear me on camera saying, john.wood@roomtoread.org. And she's like, okay. And then literally, I post this video to YouTube from remote Mpumalanga province in South Africa the next day. I put it on my Twitter feed. I'm at John Wood RTR, 318,000 followers. Put it on my Twitter feed, say, check this video out, and upload it from Mpumalanga province. An hour and a half later, I get to the Nels Pruitt airport, and there's an email on my BlackBerry from a guy in Dublin who says, I will fund Malenga's university education. That's the power of the, yeah, get excited. I'm excited. So, but that's not only so much the staff. We also bring people together frequently for convenings. There's a country director conference every year in a different country where we actually ask what works, what doesn't work, what have you learned. Program officer conferences, so we bring all of our reading room specialists together, all of our literacy specialists together. And we end up spending a lot more money on travel than I feel comfortable with, but we look at it as tuition. As long as you're having substantive conversations and learning from each other. I think we can do more, though. I really do. And I think we should have almost like, for our fundraising chapters, we have an annual celebration called the Zackies. And it's like this stupid little yak that's not mounted on a trophy pedestal. And we give chapters awards for doing innovative things. Last year, the Boston chapter won the Phoenix Award for picking up a non-performing chapter and moving it to the top tier. I think we could do an award ceremony at Room to Read to say best literacy program, best reading room, best local language publishing, and then have that country director or that specialist stand up and say why he or she feels they won the award, and then have us tell people why we feel as a management team they won the award. So there's a lot more we can do, and if you have anything that you've seen that works, or anybody here, I'm John@roomtoread.org, and I'm Wood@roomtoread.org, and I'm John.Wood@roomtoread.org. I'm not hard to find, number one rule for NGOs. Send us your ideas. We love hearing them. Hi.
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. I'm a senior student at Harvard studying computer science. Actually, interned at Microsoft before. My question is, as reading technology is overwhelming the world, especially as Kindle and iPad, and some organizations such as World Reader is actually doing something like that. They purchase Kindles and then deliver to African countries to use technology to facilitate that. My question is then, is Room to Read has any plan on getting involved in technology to
we probably will eventually, but let's be very clear about this. There's never been a trial of electronic reading in the developing world that's ever reached scale or that's ever reached a cost effectiveness. The average cost to bring a library, an old-fashioned, unapologetically bricks and mortar library to a kid in the developing world is $12. $12 per child, and that includes the training of the human beings who run and implement everything in that library. Whereas electronic means is much more expensive than that. World Reader, I know David Risher, he's an ex-Microsoft guy. David's the first to admit this is a very limited trial in one country, and it's not about primary literacy. That program is all about making English language books available to kids who are reading English at a 10th or 11th or 12th grade level. Will there eventually be electronic means of doing this? Certainly. But one of the biggest problems one laptop per child's had in a lot of parts of the world is lack of local language content. Now, we've done our thing as a good citizen. We've given OLPC permission to port all of our local language titles to the OLPC for free, because that's just the right thing to do. But the electronic stuff, I don't necessarily believe that I shouldn't say I don't necessarily believe, I don't believe it's there yet. I don't believe it's even close. And Gene Sperling, who used to run the education track at the Clinton Global Initiative, 2 years ago in his closing had a wonderful thing that he said. He said, a lot of people say, these kids in the developing world, they don't need schools, they don't need teachers, they can learn to read on their cell phone. And Gene said, that's a really easy thing to say when you're talking about somebody else's child. Long term, I'm bullish. Short term, I'm bearish.
Thank you very much.
Hey, John. My name is Albert. I'm actually a student at MIT working with a team of students to improve schools in Cambodia. And so I'm really interested in the work that you've done. Would love to get access to some of the local language content that your team has created. One of the things that...
As long as the Harvard students let me help an MIT student. Is it okay with you guys if we...
I went to Harvard as an undergrad.
Oh,
so
okay. Then your family.
I hope that's okay.
No, I'd be happy to. So just email me, and we'll get your team hooked up. But what we try to do is, rather than me saying yes, what I'll do is I'll ask your team in Cambodia to talk to Carl Khan, our country director in Cambodia, because our belief is that Cambodians should make their own decisions as to how they work together. So I'll agree to broker an introduction, then it's just up to your guys to convince my guys that the books will be well used.
Sure. One question I had, as we're looking about scaling education, especially in Cambodia, where there's not enough schools and not enough teachers because of the genocide that's happened there, one of the things that we were thinking about that we just started working on just very recently was the idea of taking audiobooks, translating them into Khmer, and broadcasting them over the radio. And I was wondering if that's something that you've looked into or thought about. There's some models of it happening, but we think it could be a powerful way of reaching schools, especially in remote areas where you can't build it fast enough.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of trials being done on that. I don't know where it's been done in a widespread way, but actually one of the things we keep our eye on is when those things happen, and I hope you'll keep us in mind, we would love it if, let's say, The Lost Baby Elephant would be one of the books they would read, because we produce, millions of these books. Yeah. And so it may make sense to do something like that in the future. The challenge, though, is the distribution, right? If they're reading that book on the radio, that's an easy thing to do, to read a book on the radio. The challenge is, how do you make sure that every child has that book in front of them so they're reading along? And to me, that's the challenge of a lot of these new ideas. A lot of new ideas are great ideas. The challenge is always, can you look at the whole supply chain and figure out exactly how it's going to work so the kids aren't just sitting there going, huh, what's this story?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Email me, though. We'll connect our guys.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Namaste, and thank you very much for all your work in Nepal and the rest of the world. I am Pukhar. I'm a second-year MPA student, Master's in Public Administration student at the Carnegie School, also a student of Professor Fernando Reimers. And I'm of course very interested in youth and education. My question is, in fragile states, in states that probably are at initial stages of democratization, you've mentioned that you're working with governments, and it's not always easy. So I'm sure you've had your set of challenges. So if you could talk a little bit more about the challenges you faced and how you went about solving them. Thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think you're from Nepal? Yeah. So I think as a Nepali, you should be super proud, because I always tell my Nepali friends that one of Nepal's most important exports is room to read. Because this model was built and designed in Nepal by Nepalis. I was present at the creation, but they're the ones who did it and then exported it to Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, etc. And I don't think Nepal gets as much credit in the story of room to read as it deserves. So I'll try to correct that by recognizing it. I mean, the government relationships, yeah, there can be some things that are very, very difficult. So I'll give you just an example of this. Is we're working now in Mannar province in northern Sri Lanka, one of the first provinces in the former LTT strongholds that has been cleared of mines. And so people are resettling there. And we are actually committed to opening 46 schools in the next year in Mannar. It's over $1.5 million investment we have committed to make. And we didn't have the money. We committed to fundraise for it and told our team go. And so there's obviously challenges there. There's still a lot of lingering suspicions. The government really restricts what can get in and who can get in. We try with Sri Lanka, we try to have our staff be evenly split between Tamils and Sinhalese so that nobody really believes that we're favoring one group over the other. But it can be very, very difficult. In Nepal, with the Maoist rebellion, there was a real suspicion of NGOs. And what we did to override that suspicion, because the Maoists were saying these NGOs are corrupt, they're stealing money, and what our team in Nepal did is they said, every time we open a new school, the headmaster is going to stand up and he's going to read the sources and uses of funds statement. It's not the most gripping speech you've ever heard. But they go through and they say, so-and-so gave this many rupees, the district development committee gave this many rupees, village development, and then here's how we spent it. Wood, cement, desks, chairs, blah, 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 and went through it all. And it became an anti-corruption device. Because if some local family given 10,000 rupees and they hear their name being read at 5,000 rupees, well, something happened. The money started to disappear. So that was just a great innovation that we had in Nepal. And I think the biggest challenge we have, the previous questioner mentioned Cambodia, one of the catch-22s of Room to Read is that we are employing only local people in country. We're trying to find people who understand notions of transparency, performance-driven culture, no excuses, and we're doing it in places where there are not enough educated people. Post-Khmer Rouge Cambodia, post-apartheid South Africa. 100% of our staff in South Africa are black South Africans, and they're very, very proud. Most of them say, I wish Room to Read had been around when I was a kid. So there definitely are huge challenges.
Hi, my name is Alice. I'm from Zambia. I'm a student here, Human Development and Psychology. And I really like Room to Read because I like the culture and the idea of the community setup, because I do think that a lot of nonprofits and NGOs, even in Zambia, come in with a different mentality. So I'm just wondering how that whole idea of working with the community, hiring local staff only, how you decided to do that, and yeah, basically how you decided to do that, how come other NGOs and nonprofit organizations don't necessarily do the same? So what was it that made you do that? Yeah,
it's I hate to keep referencing Nepal, but it really is to the full credit of Dinesh and Pankaj, who are the first leaders of Room to Read Nepal. They said, we respect the communities that we work with enough to require things of them. We know they're not lazy, and if they are lazy, then we don't want to do anything with them anyway because the investment's going to be wasted. But some of it for me just also comes just from a feeling of respect. I've traveled in Zambia many times and just have met absolutely brilliant people. They're committed to helping Zambia to improve. And when I look at them, I'm like, they don't need a handout. They really need a hand up. And one of your countrywomen, Dambisa Moyo, the author of Dead Aid, is a global ambassador for Room to Read. We're doing an event together in Vancouver next Monday night for the support of Zambian education. And I think she said it very well. If you've not read Dead Aid, you should read it. Dambisa, as a black African woman who did her PhD in economics at Cambridge, wrote a book in which she said, stop helping us in the way you're helping us. Don't dump subsidized grain on the African markets. Don't donate your used T-shirts to Africa. We have dignity. What we need are the things that are a hand up, like education and like trade. So we're big fans of that model. As I said, there are challenges, and if you decide to go back and work in Zambia, I hope that you'll talk to us, because we're looking for good people, and we're gonna grow Zambia by at least 40% in the next 2 years.
Thank you.
We don't pay very well, by the way.
Hi. I'm Sini. I was a graduate from ed school this summer, and I had the privilege of taking Professor Remus' social entrepreneurship class in the spring. So I also had the privilege of listening to your talk. But I felt like I was highly inspired by the message you left us. But when you left, I felt what you do exactly remained a black box for me. For example, I know that you have all these fundraising chapters, but I really wonder what happened in the local offices. So do your staff members, how much do they get involved in the school building process? Or are they only the identifiers of people who can build schools, or do they recruit teachers themselves, or how?
The goal of the local Room to Read staff in each of our program countries is really to act as catalysts. where they help to create something that didn't exist before. And they do that really by acting as the coordinators. So they go out and they lobby the Ministry of Education to say, we can build schools, but we can only build schools if you can provide textbooks and you can provide trained teachers and pay for them. The Room to Read team is working with the community to say, we can get this done, but we need your help in getting land donated and getting labor donated. The Room to Read team will lay in a system of monitoring and evaluation because we're very good at that. And in many of these countries, they've never had that whole notion, right? The school or a hospital gets opened, and then 3 months later, they never see anybody again, and the thing kind of deteriorates over time. Our teams go back on a regular basis and check on the quality metrics and report back through a global database so we can look at what percentage of libraries are performing, how are the schools performing, are the children showing up, are the teachers showing up, are the books being checked out, do the libraries have literacy activities. But our role at Room to Read is to be more of like a catalyst and almost like an air traffic controller, because every single project we do is turned over to the local community for them to run.
I see. Thank you. Sorry, I have another question, I guess. One thing, I think education is not only about the hardwares, but also, so it's not only the books, but also the people who teach about the books and who use the books, like teachers or librarians, that are also very important. So I wonder how do you find, or how do the communities that you work with mainly find the teachers, and where's this pool of teachers from?
The Ministry of Education. The ministries are a key partner of ours, right? We don't train teachers. We don't run curriculum. That's the job of the ministry, and we rely on the ministry to do their job.
So do they...
Can we talk about this offline? Wendy is here, Michelle's here, and I think if you want to do a deep conversation about it, we're happy to talk one-on-one.
Hey, I'm Laura. I'm a master's student here at the Ed School. And I'm interested in how you guys make your decisions about where you're going to expand and put your new resources as they come.
Yeah, it's a very tough thing to choose, because when you say yes to one country, you're saying no to probably 20 other countries where needed. And one of the things whenever I speak in public, and it's going to happen, one person is going to say, why aren't you in country X, right? We all have our favorite country X. It could be Pakistan, it could be El Salvador, it could be Ecuador, it could be Ethiopia. And the question really is answered simply. It's lack of resource. It's money. You have to raise the money. And we don't believe we will never go into a country unless we can see a clear path to reaching at least 500,000 kids in that country during the first 5 years. E.g., if you can't scale it, don't do it. Scale your existing countries. So then the question comes up when we do find ourselves with more funding, how do you choose the countries that you go into? And I'd say the short answer is we try to figure out where can we sail with favorable tailwinds as opposed to sailing into headwinds. And what I mean by that is, all other things held equal, we want to work in a place that has political stability. We want to work in a place that has social stability. Why would we choose Zambia over Afghanistan? Probably those two things right there begin to answer the question. We look for places, to the last question that was asked, we look for places where the Ministry of Education is doing a good job, where the government's allocating resources to education, where the ministry has a teacher training program and the ministry has textbooks and a curriculum that we can leverage off of, because we're very clear about what we don't do. We have to look at donor interest. Where do investors want to go, right? All things held equal, it's probably easier to raise money for South Africa than it is for Chad, because more people have visited and more people know the story, and Nelson Mandela, and there's a South African diaspora you can raise money from. And then I'd say the final thing we look at is we want to work in countries where we feel like long-term they're set up to have economic growth. Because when the kids graduate, you want them to be able to do something that's productive. And it's okay if the students decide to go back and become farmers. It doesn't bother us, because then they're better educated farmers and they're going to educate their kids. But you look at a place like Vietnam or India or South Africa, you see economic growth, and if you think about the kind of the Warren Buffett effect, if something compounds at 7% for a decade, you're on the cusp of middle class. And so I look at Vietnam as an example. I believe that Vietnam will be the first country where we will exit Vietnam. Because if it keeps growing at the rate it's growing at, they're going to be at the point of being able to afford universal education. And at that point, we can pull out, and hopefully we will then take that money and go into a free Burma under Dawn Aung Suu Kyi.
We have such glaring problems domestically. Have you had any interest in looking at our problems here?
We do. Well, I believe if you believe in education, it's not either or, it's both. And so I do things every year for domestic education from my own charitable portfolio. I'm a big fan of Teach for America. I'm a big fan of Donors Choose. And I don't believe you should ever with education say either or. It should be both. Now the question comes up, why do we work in the developing world as opposed to working, let's say, in San Francisco, where I live? Well, even the Gates Foundation does not play in the education space in the state of California because on a $63 billion annual budget, when you have limited resources, you cannot move the needle at all. So I'll give you an example of this. In Cambodia, we can go into a village, and for $4,000, we can set up a library. If I go into downtown San Francisco and tell Gavin Newsom I have $4,000 to deploy, I'm not going to get a meeting. There's no way. In these villages in Laos and Cambodia and Nepal and South Africa, they welcome us with open arms. And if you think about that shovel picture from Laos, can you imagine in America if you went and you told the parents you have to come out on the weekends and shovel and dig the foundation for your school? You'd have lawsuits and you'd have the media all over you saying, what do you mean we have to work for this? And I think part of what we've lost in this country is that community barn-raising spirit. We think that it's just the government should do it and we point fingers and it's their fault, it's their fault. So I try to do what I can personally, but if you look at our model, and we believe very much in what the Gates Foundation says on their homepage of gatesfoundation.org, across the top it says, all lives are equal. And I'll tell you that there's a lot of problems in domestic education, but when you compare a school in America to a village in post-Khmer Rouge Cambodia that has nothing, it is so glaringly different. But mostly for us, it is a numbers game. It is we have, even with $30 million a year, that's a drop in the ocean for what's being spent here.
Hi, my name is Sudhi Pulgar, and I'm former student of Professor Reimers here at the Ed School. And my question was about your model. So when you take your model, as you take your model to scale, how much room do you leave for local negotiation? So differences in different countries. So
yeah.
I guess I just want to know what are the non-negotiables of your model.
No, that's great. I mean, actually, if you'd like, I think Dr. Reimers can find you. We actually have a set of what we call non-negotiables, and then we have a thing called suggested ways of working, and those are just exactly what they are. Everything that we do at Room to Read is designed so the in-country teams can modify the programs as they see fit, right? However, we do have non-negotiables. For example, the school construction program. It is required that the local people donate land and donate labor so that they have that sense of skin in the game. It is a non-negotiable that when we put a girl on scholarship in the Room to Read program, we reserve enough money that we have enough funding to get her through secondary school. So even if we have a funding crisis, we don't have to tell a bunch of girls, we hope you enjoyed 6th grade, it's over. And then we have suggested ways of working, which are, here's what we believe should happen, but you can decide how to do it differently. I'll give you just a really quick example of innovation we saw in Bangladesh this year. This year in Bangladesh, or 2 years ago, last year in Bangladesh, we launched our Girls Scholarship Program. 200 girls in the scholarship program, and they all live on the Chars. The Chars are the river islands in Bangladesh. If you live in rural Bangladesh, chances are you're poor. If you live on a river island, you're really poor, because this is like the silty land that's constantly shifting as the rivers rise and the rivers fall. And we found out during the rainy season, and this year's rainy season was worse than ever, that these girls didn't go to school for 4 months because they couldn't get off the islands. What was once desert is now a 7-kilometer wide river. And our country director, Zaki Hassan, petitioned to get funding for an innovation he called Boat to Read. We have these 4 longboats that every day go out to the river islands, pick the girls up, they get on with their books, and they have a little study session, and the Boat to Read just goes down the river, picks up some more girls, picks up some more girls, picks up some more girls. Well, what's beautiful about that story is the government approached Zaki and said, well, you're taking all these hundreds of girls to school every day. You need to have a boat to read for the boys. And Zaki said, we should. We have a limited budget. You're the government. Why don't you fund a boat to read for the boys? And I'll match you boat for boat for boat for boat. And he actually got the provisional government to actually allocate funding. So there's now 4 boats to read for boys, and there's 4 boats to read for girls. And that's an area where we tell the country directors, you do what you feel you need to do, and we'll raise the money for you.
Oh, thank you today. My name is Kenichi Iriman from Japan. I'm interested in your today's story. I have a general question. What do you expect Japanese businessman to do for your activity? Now I'm a MBA student. After that, after this graduation, I will work at a Japanese company. So I want to know what do you expect Japanese businessmen to do for your activity?
That's great. I appreciate the opportunity. And again, it's john.wood@roomtoread.org. Japan has been a very generous funding country for Room to Read. I'm very proud of how actively Japan has embraced Room to Read. Japan is now, we raise money in about 30 countries around the world. Japan is now number 4 of our funding countries. So we're very excited about that. That started as a completely volunteer-driven effort by a group of expats in Tokyo, along with Japanese business leaders in Tokyo. Our Tokyo chapter is now the largest fundraising chapter we have anywhere in the world. It's 1,000 people involved in the fundraising chapter. We have events in Osaka, we have events all over the Kansai and Kobe and Hiroshima, all over. And Japanese companies are getting very involved because they're realizing the importance of investing in the developing world. So we have a grant from Mitsui Marine Life Insurance Company for our work in India. We have a relationship with Book Off. Sato-san does a fundraising drive through Book Off every year that raises $75,000 to $100,000. We have a relationship with, I'm trying to think of the other companies we work with in Japan, quite a few of them, but we want to work with a lot more. And our hope with the Japanese companies is to say, let Room to Read be part of your corporate social responsibility program, because the Japanese companies realize that the markets of the future are in places like India and Vietnam and South Africa. And we can say to them, we're already there. And we are run like a business. So we're very, very proud of how much support we have from Japan, but it still have a long ways to go. Japan is the second largest funding country to UNICEF after the US. My goal is that Japan will be the second largest funding country to Room to Read. Or maybe not number 2, maybe it'll be number 1. Ichiban, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Where do you work? Where do you work?
Chemical industry.
Okay.
60 chemical industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
We should talk. Wendy, can you talk to Wendy afterwards? Hi.
Hi, my name's Toby. I'm a resident with the Boston Teacher Residency. And I was wondering if you could speak more about how Room to Read goes beyond room with books and promotes literacy instruction.
You want to handle that one, Fernando? No? No? Are you sure? Okay, it's a tough thing. So right now we should talk to you offline because it is a very complex question that does not lend itself to an answer given in less than 90 seconds, which I've been told I have. They've been signaling me to end the time. But what we are doing is really working in each country to figure out who are the literacy specialists. Are there other NGOs that are doing good work in this area? And many times it hasn't really been done before, right? You can't find a lot of people who can tell you how to teach children the letters of the Khmer alphabet and how you go from letters to words to sentences to paragraphs. Well, those people do exist. We're bringing them in and having them consult with us. We also, to be honest with you, are just inventing it as we go along. We have literacy pilots we've been doing for the last year in South Asia, in Sri Lanka, in Nepal, and in India. And we've literally had to go out and do things like we've invented little Hindi like phonics cards that sound very, very simple, but it hasn't really been done before. So we're actually trying to work with the Ministry of Education and work with the teachers and work with the experts to say, how can we actually do more in this critical area of literacy? And you know, we're probably in the bottom of the first inning on this. It's something that is not really been done enough. It's one of the reasons there's 770 million illiterate people in the world, and as I mentioned, and probably it's partly to your question, ma'am, about why do the developing world versus the US, is that 98% of the people in the world today who are illiterate are in the developing world. So if you're a literacy organization, that's where you really need to be doing the work. The problem is that there's really not a lot of taillights you can follow. But just like with local language publishing, you know what? We figured it out. We started small. We've tried to figure out what works. We hired evaluators to tell us what we were doing well and what we were doing badly. We took the success stories and we just basically tried to say, how do you magnify those successes? So it's not a super long answer to a complex question, but we'll be around afterwards. We're happy to talk more.
So, okay. No more questions. So before we give John a big round of applause, I want to share with you a story. There are two ways in which John reminds me of Ben Franklin, one of my heroes. One of them is, as you know, Ben Franklin moved to Philly, and he found that the conversations were pretty boring. And he talked to 4 of his friends, and he said, why don't we each donate a third of our library and create a library? And lo and behold, the conversations became pretty interesting. And this is what Room to Read is doing for the world. The second way in which he reminds me of good old Ben is that we learned from him that a penny saved is a penny earned. And John is a big saver of pennies. I'll tell you 2 stories, and I hope I won't embarrass you. One day he's going to a big fundraiser in New York City We're talking on the phone. I hear the pouring rain behind it, and he says, I can't find a taxi. There isn't any taxi. I'm going to be late. So he finds, I guess, a pirate taxi there, and he says, how much to take me to this place? And the guy says, $20. And John says, how about 10? And I tell John, I think he settled for 15. I didn't know you were such a negotiator. He says, well, that's another book for our libraries that I saved. You go into his office and you see his pens that he brings from hotels, says, this is money we don't have to spend, goes to the libraries. So because I know how much you value time, and you understand that in the end we all have to account for our time, given the big needs that exist in the world, I thank you for the time you've spent with us tonight. And I thank you, more importantly, for the work you're doing to produce good conversations in the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.